How your mind tricks you. Don't believe everything you think. Introduction. Your mind, your greatest ally, shapes your reality, fuels your ambitions, and guides you through life. It's where every dream begins, where every challenge is solved, and where the story of your life unfolds. But what if I told you it's also your greatest trickster? That it can distort your thoughts, lead you to false conclusions, cloud your judgment, and even hold you back from reaching your true potential. Every day, without even realizing it, we fall into mental traps that affect our decisions, relationships, and confidence. These are subtle, sneaky tricks your mind plays, designed to keep you comfortable, but ultimately keeping you stuck. In this book, we dive deep into the workings of the human mind, exposing the 10 most common mental traps that deceive us and shape our reality in ways we don't always understand. But this isn't just about identifying the tricks. Each chapter is packed with actionable insights, real-life examples, and proven strategies to help you break free from these traps. You'll learn how to challenge your thoughts, shift your mindset, and build the mental resilience needed to live a more empowered and intentional life. Whether it's overcoming self-doubt, escaping the grip of negativity, or learning to embrace uncertainty, this book is your guide to mastering your mind and, ultimately, your life. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Control. Do you ever feel like you need to control everything? Your day-to-day schedule, how people respond to you, or even the outcomes of events in your life? It's natural to feel this way. Our minds are wired to crave stability and certainty, and we often mistake control for security. The mind whispers, "If you can just manage every little detail, nothing will go wrong." But here's the reality. No matter how hard you try, life is full of uncertainties and variables you simply can't influence. Think about the weather. You can plan your day around a sunny forecast, but an unexpected rainstorm might still catch you off guard. Or consider other people's actions. You might spend hours worrying about how someone will react to your decisions, but you can't dictate their feelings or responses. These are things beyond your grasp, yet they often become sources of stress when we try to control them. The illusion of control can also lead to overthinking and micromanagement. Have you ever spent hours perfecting something minor, thinking it would prevent a mistake, only to find out it didn't matter in the grand scheme of things? That's your mind trying to exert control over a situation to avoid discomfort or uncertainty. While this might seem harmless at first, it often leads to exhaustion, frustration, and even anxiety. So, what's the solution? It starts with understanding the difference between what's within your control and what isn't. You can't control the future or what others think of you, but you can control your attitude, your choices, and how you respond to life's unpredictability. For example, instead of stressing about an outcome, focus on preparing to the best of your ability. Instead of worrying about someone else's opinion, focus on acting with integrity and kindness. When you let go of the need to control every little thing, you create space for acceptance and flexibility. Life becomes less about fighting the inevitable and more about flowing with it. You begin to see that it's okay not to have all the answers or solutions. In fact, some of the most beautiful moments in life happen when you let go and trust the process. This isn't about giving up or being passive. It's about focusing your energy on what truly matters. Imagine how much lighter you'd feel if you stopped trying to hold on to everything so tightly. By redirecting your attention to what you can influence, your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions, you empower yourself to live a more peaceful and intentional life. Chapter 2. Confirmation Bias. Have you ever noticed that you're more likely to believe information that supports your existing beliefs, even if it's not entirely accurate? This is called confirmation bias, and it's one of the most common ways our minds trick us. Essentially, your brain loves to be right, so it filters the world in a way that reinforces what you already think, while dismissing or ignoring anything that challenges those views. For example, if you believe a certain diet is the best for health, you'll probably pay more attention to articles or testimonials that praise it, while disregarding studies or opinions that question its effectiveness. If you think a co-worker is difficult, you're more likely to focus on their flaws and overlook the times they've been cooperative or kind. Your mind creates a feedback loop. The more you confirm your beliefs, the stronger they become, whether they're accurate or not. This bias is especially powerful in the age of social media and tailored content. Algorithms feed you posts, videos, and news that align with your preferences, creating a bubble where it feels like everyone thinks the same way you do. Over time, this can make your worldview narrower, leaving little room for growth, understanding, or critical thinking. But here's the good news. You can break free from confirmation bias by being intentional about how you process information. Start by questioning your assumptions. When you come across something that supports your belief, ask yourself, is this really true, or am I just seeing what I want to see? Similarly, when you encounter an opposing view, resist the urge to dismiss it outright. Instead, explore it with curiosity. Why do others think this way? What evidence supports their perspective? It can also help to seek out diverse sources of information. If you always read the same blogs or watch the same news channels, try stepping outside your comfort zone. Listen to different voices, especially those that challenge your ideas. This doesn't mean you have to change your mind, but exposing yourself to new viewpoints will make your thinking more balanced and informed. Remember that it's okay to be wrong. Changing your mind isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of growth. By acknowledging and addressing your confirmation bias, you open yourself up to a world of possibilities, deeper understanding, and richer conversations. The next time you catch your mind looking for proof that you're right, pause and ask, what am I not seeing? That question alone can lead to profound self-awareness. Chapter 3. Catastrophizing. Have you ever faced a small problem, and before you know it, your mind has blown it up into a full-blown disaster? This mental habit is called catastrophizing, and it's one of the most common ways your mind tricks you into unnecessary stress and anxiety. It's when you imagine the worst-case scenario and convince yourself it's inevitable, even when there's no real evidence to support it. Picture this. You send an email to your boss and don't get an immediate reply. Instead of assuming they're busy, your mind might leap to conclusions like, they must be mad at me, or worse, I'm going to lose my job. What started as a neutral event spirals into a dramatic chain of imagined consequences, leaving you feeling overwhelmed and panicked. Catastrophizing often starts with a kernel of truth, a missed deadline, a forgotten task, or a misunderstanding. But instead of addressing the situation calmly, your mind creates a domino effect of exaggerated outcomes. It's like turning a small crack in a dam into a full-scale flood in your imagination. This habit not only drains your energy, but also prevents you from responding effectively to the actual problem. So how can you stop catastrophizing? The first step is to recognize when it's happening. Pay attention to your thoughts. Are they spiraling into extreme or unlikely scenarios? Once you notice this pattern, pause and challenge your assumptions. Ask yourself, what's the evidence that this will really happen? What are other, more likely outcomes? Another helpful technique is to focus on the present moment. When you catch your mind racing toward disaster, bring your attention back to what's happening right now. Deep breathing, mindfulness exercises, or even writing down your thoughts can help you break free from the mental spiral. You can also practice reframing your thoughts. Instead of thinking, everything will go wrong, try asking, what's the worst that could realistically happen, and how would I handle it? Often, you'll realize that even the worst isn't as bad as you feared, and you already have the tools to deal with it. Remember that your thoughts are not facts. Just because your mind tells you something doesn't make it true. By challenging catastrophic thinking and replacing it with balanced, realistic perspectives, you can free yourself from unnecessary worry and face challenges with confidence. The next time your mind whispers, "What if everything falls apart?" respond with, "What if it all works out?" You might be surprised how much lighter you feel. Chapter 4. The Spotlight Effect. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like everyone was watching you, analyzing your every move? Maybe you've worried that people would notice a small stain on your shirt, a stumble in your step, or that one thing you said that didn't come out quite right. This mental trick is known as the spotlight effect, and it's your mind convincing you that you're at the center of everyone's attention. The truth? Most people aren't paying nearly as much attention to you as you think. They're too busy focusing on themselves. The spotlight effect happens because we're naturally self-centered, not in a selfish way, but simply because we experience life from our own perspective. When something feels significant to us, like a mistake we made or how we look, it's easy to assume it's equally significant to others. But most of the time, people are caught up in their own thoughts, worries, and concerns. They might notice you briefly, but they're unlikely to dwell on it or even remember it later. For example, let's say you trip while walking into a meeting. Your mind might immediately tell you, "Everyone saw that. They're probably laughing at me or thinking I'm clumsy." But the reality is, most people likely noticed for a second and then moved on. Some might not have noticed at all. Even if someone did, they're unlikely to dwell on it. They're more focused on their own lives. The spotlight effect can hold you back in many ways. It can make you avoid social situations, hesitate to speak up, or second-guess yourself unnecessarily. The good news is you can break free from this mental trap by shifting your perspective. Start by reminding yourself that people are generally more focused on themselves than on you. Just like you're worrying about how you're perceived, they're worrying about how they're perceived too. Another helpful strategy is to put things into perspective. Ask yourself, will this moment matter in a day, a week, or a year? Often the answer is no. This realization can help you relax and move on. You can also practice self-compassion. Instead of being your own harshest critic, treat yourself the way you would a friend. If a friend tripped in front of others, would you think less of them? Probably not. You'd shrug it off and move on. Give yourself the same grace. Finally, focus on being present. When you're caught up in the spotlight effect, you're overly focused on yourself. Shift your attention outward. Engage with the people around you, listen actively, and participate in the moment. You'll not only feel less self-conscious, but also more connected and confident. Remember, the world isn't scrutinizing you as much as your mind might make you think. The next time you feel like you're under a microscope, take a deep breath and remind yourself, the spotlight isn't on you, it's just your imagination. Chapter 5. Negative self-talk. Have you ever caught yourself saying things in your head that you would never say to a friend or loved one? Statements like, "I'm so stupid," "I can't do anything right," or "I'm not good enough." This is negative self-talk, and it's one of the most harmful ways your mind can trick you. It's like having a bully inside your head, constantly criticizing and tearing you down. The worst part, you often believe it, even though it's not true. Negative self-talk can stem from many places: past experiences, fear of failure, or comparisons to others. Maybe you made a mistake at work, and instead of seeing it as a learning opportunity, your mind instantly jumps to harsh judgments. "I'll never get this right." Or perhaps you look in the mirror and think, "I'm not attractive enough," without questioning where that standard even comes from. Over time, these thoughts become automatic, shaping how you see yourself and limiting what you believe you're capable of achieving. The problem with negative self-talk is that it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell yourself, "I'm not good at public speaking," you're less likely to practice or take risks in that area, which reinforces the belief. This cycle can keep you stuck, holding you back from reaching your full potential. It also takes a toll on your mental health, contributing to feelings of low self-esteem, anxiety, and even depression. So, how do you break free from the grip of negative self-talk? The first step is awareness. Pay attention to your inner dialogue. Notice when you're being overly critical or harsh with yourself. You might even keep a journal to track these thoughts, writing them down to see just how often they occur and what triggers them. Once you've identified your negative self-talk, challenge it. Ask yourself, is this thought really true? Where's the evidence? Often you'll find that these thoughts are based on assumptions or exaggerations, not facts. For instance, if you think, "I always mess up," consider times when you've succeeded or handled challenges well. Replacing "I always fail" with "sometimes I struggle, but I've overcome challenges before" can shift your mindset significantly. Another powerful technique is to practice self-compassion. Treat yourself as you would a friend. If a friend made a mistake, you wouldn't say, "You're such a failure." Instead, you'd likely say, "It's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. What can you learn from this?" Start speaking to yourself with the same kindness and understanding. Affirmations can also help rewire your mind. Create positive statements that counteract your negative self-talk. For example, replace "I'm not good enough" with "I am learning and growing every day." Say these affirmations to yourself regularly, especially when negative thoughts creep in. Over time, they'll become your new default. Focus on gratitude and what you're doing well. It's easy to get caught up in what's wrong, but make it a habit to acknowledge your strengths, successes, and progress. Celebrate small wins and remind yourself that growth takes time. Negative self-talk is a habit, and like any habit, it can be changed with patience and practice. The next time you catch your inner critic speaking up, pause and remind yourself, "I don't have to believe everything I think. You are worthy, capable, and so much more than your negative thoughts." Chapter 6. Emotional Reasoning. Have you ever thought, "I feel it, so it must be true"? Maybe you felt anxious before a presentation and thought, "I'm going to mess this up." Or you felt hurt after a friend cancelled plans and thought, "They don't care about me." This mental habit, called emotional reasoning, is when you rely on your feelings to determine reality, assuming that your emotions reflect the truth. But here's the catch. Feelings are powerful, but they're not always accurate indicators of what's really happening. Emotional reasoning happens because our brains naturally want to make sense of the world. When we feel something strongly, fear, sadness, anger, our minds rush to create a story that matches those emotions. For instance, if you feel nervous before starting something new, your mind might interpret that as, "I'm not prepared," or "I'm going to fail," even if you've prepared thoroughly. The feeling of nervousness doesn't necessarily mean you're unready. It just means you're stepping out of your comfort zone. The problem with emotional reasoning is that it can cloud your judgment and lead to negative thinking patterns. If you assume your feelings are facts, you might avoid opportunities, misinterpret situations, or make decisions based on fear rather than logic. For example, if you feel insecure in a relationship, you might jump to the conclusion that your partner is losing interest, even if they've done nothing to suggest that. Acting on these feelings without questioning them can create unnecessary conflict and self-doubt. So, How can you break free from emotional reasoning? The first step is to separate your feelings from reality. Acknowledge your emotions without letting them dictate your thoughts. For example, if you feel anxious about a big project, instead of thinking, "I'm going to fail," try saying, "I feel nervous because this is important to me, but that doesn't mean I won't do well." This simple shift allows you to validate your feelings without letting them define the outcome. Challenge your thoughts by asking questions like, "What evidence do I have to support this feeling? Is there another way to look at this situation? What would I tell a friend who felt this way?" Often, you'll find that your feelings are based on assumptions or worst-case scenarios rather than facts. By questioning these assumptions, you can reframe your thoughts in a more balanced and realistic way. Practicing mindfulness can also help you manage emotional reasoning. When you feel overwhelmed by an emotion, take a step back and observe it without judgment. Notice where you feel it in your body and label it. "This is anxiety," or "This is frustration." By naming the emotion, you create distance between yourself and the feeling, making it easier to see it as just one part of your experience, not the whole truth. Another strategy is to focus on actions rather than reactions. Instead of letting your emotions dictate how you respond, think about your values and goals. For example, if you feel discouraged about your progress on a project, instead of giving up, remind yourself why you started and take one small step forward. Acting in alignment with your goals rather than your feelings can build confidence and resilience. Remember that emotions are temporary. What feels overwhelming in the moment often fades with time. The next time you find yourself thinking, "I feel this, so it must be true," pause and remind yourself, feelings are valid, but they're not facts. By learning to challenge emotional reasoning, you can make clearer, more thoughtful decisions and free yourself from the grip of unnecessary fear and doubt. Chapter 7. Imposter Syndrome. Have you ever achieved something significant, landed a promotion, completed a big project, or received praise for your work, only to feel like you didn't truly deserve it? Maybe you thought, "I just got lucky," or "They'll figure out I'm not as good as they think I am." This mental pattern, known as imposter syndrome, tricks you into doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud, even when you've worked hard and earned your success. Imposter syndrome is surprisingly common, especially among high achievers. People who set high standards for themselves or work in competitive fields often experience it because they believe they need to be perfect to be legitimate. Despite evidence of their skills and accomplishments, they feel like they're one mistake away from being exposed. This can lead to constant anxiety, overworking to prove yourself, or even avoiding new challenges out of fear of failure. The root of imposter syndrome lies in the unrealistic expectations we set for ourselves. If you believe you need to know everything, get things right on the first try, or never struggle, you'll inevitably feel like you're falling short, even when you're performing well. Social comparisons can make this worse. In today's world of curated social media and polished LinkedIn profiles, it's easy to look at others and think, "They have it all figured out. Why don't I?" But here's the truth. No one has it all figured out. Everyone faces challenges, makes mistakes, and feels uncertain at times. The difference is that people who don't struggle with imposter syndrome don't let those moments define their self-worth. They see mistakes as opportunities to learn, not proof of incompetence. So, how can you overcome imposter syndrome? Start by recognizing it for what it is, a trick your mind plays on you. Just because you feel like a fraud doesn't mean you are one. Acknowledge those feelings when they come up, but don't let them dictate how you see yourself. Remind yourself that feelings aren't facts, They're temporary and often exaggerated. Take a step back and look at the evidence of your abilities. Write down your accomplishments, skills, and positive feedback you've received from others. When imposter syndrome strikes, revisit this list to remind yourself of what you've achieved. This exercise helps counteract the tendency to dismiss your success as luck or a fluke. It's also helpful to reframe your mindset around learning and growth. Instead of thinking, "I should already know this," shift to, "I'm still learning and that's okay." Nobody starts as an expert. Even the most accomplished people were beginners at some point. Embrace challenges as opportunities to grow rather than as tests of your worth. Another powerful strategy is to talk about it. Imposter syndrome thrives in silence. Share your feelings with trusted friends, colleagues, or mentors. You'll likely discover that they've experienced similar doubts, which can help normalize your feelings and make them less intimidating. Hearing others' stories can also remind you that even successful people face self-doubt. It's a part of being human. Practice self-compassion. Be kind to yourself, especially when things don't go as planned. Recognize that making mistakes or feeling uncertain doesn't make you less capable. It makes you human. Treat yourself with the same understanding and encouragement you would offer a friend. Overcoming imposter syndrome takes time and effort, but it's entirely possible. The next time you hear that inner voice saying, "I don't belong here," pause and remind yourself, "I've worked hard to get where I am, and I deserve to be here." The truth is, you're not a fraud. You're growing, learning, and earning your place every day. Chapter 8. Cognitive Dissonance. Have you ever felt uncomfortable when your actions didn't align with your beliefs or values? Maybe you told yourself you'd eat healthier, but you grabbed a fast food meal anyway, and then you found yourself rationalizing it with thoughts like, "I didn't have time to cook," or "one meal won't matter." That uncomfortable tension you feel in moments like these is called cognitive dissonance. It's a mental conflict that arises when your behavior and your beliefs are out of sync. Cognitive dissonance happens because your mind wants consistency. When your actions contradict your values or beliefs, your brain experiences a kind of mental discomfort and works to resolve it. This resolution often takes the form of rationalization, convincing yourself that your actions are justified or that your beliefs weren't that important to begin with. For instance, if you skipped a workout despite committing to a fitness routine, you might think, "I worked hard yesterday, so I deserve a break." While this explanation soothes the discomfort, it doesn't address the underlying inconsistency. The problem with cognitive dissonance is that it can create patterns of self-deception. Instead of addressing the gap between your actions and beliefs, you build excuses to bridge the gap temporarily. Over time, this can lead to frustration, guilt, and even a weakening of your values. For example, if you repeatedly justify breaking promises to yourself, like saving money or being punctual, you might start to lose trust in your ability to follow through. But cognitive dissonance isn't all bad. It's actually a sign that you care about your values. That discomfort is your mind's way of signaling that something feels off. The key is to use this signal constructively, rather than ignoring it or rationalizing it away. So how can you deal with cognitive dissonance in a healthy way? The first step is to notice when it's happening. Pay attention to moments when you feel uneasy about a decision or action. Instead of brushing off that feeling, pause and ask yourself, what belief or value is this conflicting with? Naming the source of the dissonance can help you understand what's really bothering you. Evaluate your actions and beliefs honestly. Sometimes dissonance occurs because your beliefs need adjusting. For instance, if you've always thought, "I have to be perfect to succeed," but your experiences show that mistakes are a natural part of learning, it might be time to rethink that belief. On the other hand, if your actions are consistently misaligned with your values, it might be a sign to refocus on what matters most to you. Another strategy is to create small, actionable steps toward alignment. If you've been telling yourself you want to save money but keep overspending, start by setting a realistic budget for the week. Small, consistent actions can help rebuild the connection between your values and your behavior, reducing the need for excuses or justifications. It's also important to practice self-compassion. Cognitive dissonance can make you feel guilty or ashamed, but beating yourself up won't help. Instead, acknowledge that you're human and that it's okay to struggle with alignment sometimes. Use these moments as opportunities to learn and grow, rather than as reasons to judge yourself harshly. Remind yourself why your values matter. Reflect on the bigger picture. Why is this belief or goal important to you? For example, if you value health but find yourself skipping exercise, think about how staying active supports your overall well-being and long-term happiness. Connecting with your deeper why can motivate you to take actions that align with your values, even when it's challenging. Cognitive dissonance is a natural part of being human, and it doesn't mean you're failing. It means you care. By facing it head-on, questioning your assumptions, and making intentional changes, you can turn moments of dissonance into opportunities for personal growth and greater alignment with the person you want to be. Chapter 9. Overgeneralization. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, "I always mess up," or "nothing ever goes right for me"? This mental habit is called overgeneralization, and it happens when you take one negative experience and use it to define your entire reality. Your mind exaggerates a single moment of failure, rejection, or disappointment, and convinces you that it's part of an unchangeable pattern. It's as if one rainy day makes you believe the sun will never shine again. Overgeneralization often starts small, triggered by an emotional event. Maybe you didn't do well on a job interview, and instead of thinking, "This one didn't work out," your mind jumps to, "I'm terrible at interviews," or "I'll never get a good job." The problem with overgeneralization is that it amplifies negativity and prevents you from seeing the full picture. It turns isolated incidents into universal truths, making your challenges feel permanent and your successes invisible. This thinking pattern can affect every area of your life: relationships, career, health, and even your self-esteem. For example, if a relationship ends, you might think, "I'm always unlucky in love," ignoring the fact that you've had meaningful connections in the past, or that this breakup is a natural part of life. Or if you make a mistake at work, you might think, "I'm a failure," disregarding all the times you've done your job well. Overgeneralization creates a mental fog, making it hard to see opportunities, growth, and nuance. Why does overgeneralization happen? It's partly because your brain is wired to protect you from pain. By creating a rule based on a negative experience, your mind tries to prepare you for similar situations in the future. If you convince yourself that you'll always fail, you might avoid risks altogether, which feels safer in the short term. But in the long term, this mindset can hold you back from trying new things, building resilience, and finding success. Breaking free from overgeneralization requires a conscious effort to challenge your thoughts and reframe your perspective. The first step is to recognize when you're overgeneralizing. Pay attention to words like always, never, and everyone. These absolute terms are often red flags that your mind is making broad assumptions based on limited evidence. Once you've identified an overgeneralized thought, ask yourself, is this really true? What evidence do I have to support it? For example, if you're thinking, "I'll never be good at this," take a moment to list times when you've succeeded in similar situations. Often, you'll find that your mind is ignoring the positive and focusing solely on the negative. Another powerful strategy is to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Remind yourself that one moment doesn't define your entire story. Life is a mix of ups and downs, and no single event can capture your full potential. For instance, if you didn't get the promotion you wanted, instead of thinking, "I'll never advance in my career," reframe it as, "This opportunity didn't work out, but I can learn from this experience and try again." It's also important to practice self-compassion. Overgeneralization often comes from a place of self-criticism, where you hold yourself to impossible standards. Treat yourself with kindness and understanding, just as you would a friend. If a friend told you they failed at something, would you agree that they're doomed to fail forever? Probably not. You'd encourage them to keep going and remind them of their strengths. Offer yourself the same support. Mindfulness can also help you stay grounded. When you're caught in the trap of overgeneralization, bring your focus back to the present moment. Notice what's happening right now, without judgment. Instead of letting your mind spiral into the past or future, anchor yourself in the here and now, where challenges are often more manageable than they seem. Remind yourself that setbacks are part of growth. Everyone faces obstacles and makes mistakes, but those moments don't define who you are. They're stepping stones on the path to becoming stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The next time you hear yourself thinking, "This always happens to me," pause and challenge that thought. Ask yourself, what else is true? You might be surprised by how much light shines through the clouds when you take the time to look for it. Chapter 10. The Halo Effect. Have you ever met someone who seemed so charming, confident, or talented that you automatically assumed they were great at everything? Or maybe you've judged someone negatively based on one unappealing trait, even though you didn't know much else about them. This mental shortcut is known as the halo effect, and it's your brain's way of letting one characteristic, good or bad, overshadow everything else about a person or situation. While this can make snap judgments easier, it often leads to distorted perceptions and unfair biases. The halo effect happens because your mind likes simplicity. Instead of evaluating a person or situation based on multiple factors, it latches onto one standout trait and uses it to fill in the blanks. For instance, if someone is physically attractive, your brain might automatically associate them with positive qualities like intelligence, kindness, or competence, even if there's no evidence to support those assumptions. On the flip side, if someone has a habit you dislike, such as speaking loudly, you might unfairly conclude that they're rude or inconsiderate, ignoring other aspects of their personality. This effect is not just limited to people. It can influence how you perceive brands, products, and even ideas. For example, if a company has sleek advertising, you might assume its products are high quality, even if you've never used them. Similarly, if a popular figure endorses a cause, you might agree with it without fully understanding its implications. The halo effect can be subtle, but its impact is profound, shaping decisions, relationships, and judgments in ways you might not even realize. The problem with the halo effect is that it often leads to unfair biases and missed opportunities. When you overvalue one positive trait, you might overlook flaws or red flags. For instance, a charismatic leader might gain followers despite making poor decisions because people associate their charm with competence. Conversely, when you overemphasize a negative trait, you might dismiss someone's potential or fail to see their strengths. This can limit your ability to form balanced, meaningful relationships and make informed decisions. So how can you overcome the halo effect and see people and situations more clearly? The first step is to recognize when it's happening. Pay attention to your initial impressions and ask yourself, Am I basing my opinion on one trait or on a well-rounded view of this person or situation? Simply becoming aware of the halo effect can help you pause and think more critically. Challenge your assumptions. If you find yourself overly impressed by someone, ask yourself, what evidence do I have to support my opinion? Am I overlooking any flaws? Similarly, if you've judged someone negatively, ask, what strengths or positive traits might I be missing? This practice helps you see people and situations in a more balanced way, rather than through the lens of one dominant characteristic. It's also helpful to gather more information before forming an opinion. Instead of relying on first impressions, take the time to observe or learn more about a person or situation. If you're hiring someone, for example, don't let their confidence in the interview overshadow their qualifications or past performance. If you're considering a product, read reviews or ask for recommendations rather than relying solely on how it's marketed. Another strategy is to practice empathy and openness. Remind yourself that everyone is complex and multifaceted, just like you. People have strengths and weaknesses, and no one fits neatly into a single category. By approaching others with curiosity and a willingness to learn, you can form deeper, more authentic connections. Be mindful of how the halo effect influences your own self-perception. Just as you might judge others based on one trait, you might judge yourself in the same way. For example, you might focus on a single mistake and let it overshadow your achievements, or you might overestimate your abilities in one area and ignore where you need to grow. Strive for a balanced view of yourself, recognizing both your strengths and areas for improvement. The halo effect is a natural mental shortcut, but it doesn't have to control your perceptions. By questioning your assumptions, gathering more information, and embracing a nuanced view of the world, you can move beyond superficial judgments and see people and situations for what they truly are. The next time you catch yourself thinking, they seem perfect, or they're always like this, pause and dig deeper. You might be surprised at what you discover when you look beyond the halo. A network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Chapter 11. The Anchoring Effect. Have you ever been influenced by the first piece of information you received, even if it wasn't entirely accurate or relevant? Maybe you saw a price tag for a car at $30,000 and immediately judged all lower prices as good deals, even if the car wasn't worth that much. Or perhaps someone told you, this person is difficult to work with, and you found it hard to see them differently, even after positive experiences. This is the anchoring effect, a mental shortcut where your mind latches onto an initial piece of information and uses it as a reference point for all future judgments or decisions. The anchoring effect is powerful because it happens subconsciously. When you encounter a piece of information, whether it's a number, a statement, or even a first impression, your brain uses it as a mental anchor. All subsequent thoughts and evaluations are compared to this anchor, even if it's arbitrary or flawed. For example, if a salary negotiation starts with a lowball offer, you might end up settling for less than you're worth because the initial number sets the tone for the discussion. Similarly, in social situations, a first impression, positive or negative, can influence how you perceive someone's actions, no matter what they do afterward. This mental bias can lead to significant distortions in how you see the world. Anchoring can cause you to overvalue or undervalue things, miss important details, or make decisions that aren't in your best interest. In marketing, businesses often use anchoring to influence your spending. For instance, a store might display a high-priced item prominently to make mid-priced items seem like bargains. Anchors also play a role in negotiations, legal judgments, and even everyday conversations. Once an anchor is set, it's hard to break free from its influence. But the anchoring effect isn't just about numbers or negotiations. It also impacts how you view yourself. If someone labels you early on in life, calling you shy, talented, or not good at math, that label can become an anchor for your self-perception. Even as you grow and change, you might unconsciously compare yourself to that initial judgment, limiting your potential or skewing how you see your abilities. So, how do you overcome the anchoring effect and make clearer, more rational decisions? The first step is to recognize when an anchor is influencing you. Ask yourself, am I basing my decision or opinion on the first piece of information I received? Is this initial reference point actually accurate or relevant? Awareness is the key to breaking free from automatic thinking. Gather more information and expand your perspective. If you're shopping, compare prices across multiple sources instead of relying on the first number you see. If you're meeting someone new, give yourself time to observe their behavior and form your own opinions rather than sticking to what you were told. The more data you have, the less power a single anchor will have over your judgment. Another strategy is to set your own anchors deliberately. If you're entering a negotiation, research the fair market value ahead of time and use that as your reference point rather than relying on what the other party presents. Similarly, when evaluating your own abilities or worth, base your judgments on facts and evidence, like skills you've developed or achievements you've earned, rather than on outdated labels or criticisms. Mindfulness can also help you resist the pull of anchors. When you notice an anchor influencing your thoughts, pause and take a step back. Reflect on what really matters in the situation and focus on the bigger picture. Anchors often narrow your perspective, but mindfulness can help you widen it, allowing for a more balanced and thoughtful response. Practice flexibility and openness. Remind yourself that no single piece of information, whether it's a price, a label, or a first impression, defines the whole story. People, situations, and opportunities are complex and multifaceted. By staying curious and questioning your assumptions, you can break free from the anchoring effect and make decisions that align with your values and goals. The anchoring effect is a subtle but pervasive mental bias that can shape your choices and perceptions in surprising ways. By becoming aware of its influence and taking steps to counteract it, you can approach life with greater clarity and confidence. The next time you find yourself stuck on an initial impression or number, pause and ask, what else do I need to consider? With this mindset, you'll be able to anchor yourself in truth rather than in assumptions. Chapter 12. The Bandwagon Effect. Have you ever found yourself agreeing with the majority, not because you deeply believed in something, but simply because everyone else seemed to? Maybe you bought into a trend you didn't care for, supported an idea you hadn't fully researched, or felt pressure to conform to a group's opinion. This is the bandwagon effect, a psychological phenomenon where people adopt certain behaviors, beliefs, or attitudes simply because others are doing the same. It's your mind's way of saying, if everyone else thinks this is right, then it must be right. The bandwagon effect is rooted in our deep need for social connection and belonging. Humans are hardwired to seek approval and avoid rejection, so we often look to the crowd for cues about what's acceptable or desirable. In some situations, this can be harmless or even beneficial, like cheering for a sports team with your friends or adopting a new technology that makes life easier. But in other cases, it can lead to blind conformity, groupthink, or decisions that don't align with your values or critical thinking. This effect can show up in many areas of life. In consumer behavior, it's why people flock to buy the latest gadget, not because they need it, but because it's seen as the must-have item of the moment. In social situations, it can lead to peer pressure, where you go along with a group's choices to fit in, even if you disagree. And in larger contexts, like politics or social movements, the bandwagon effect can amplify ideas, whether positive or harmful, because people jump on board without fully understanding the implications. The danger of the bandwagon effect is that it often overrides your individual judgment. When you're caught up in the crowd, it's easy to stop asking important questions. Do I really agree with this? Does this align with my values? What are the consequences of this choice? Instead, the group's momentum carries you forward, making it harder to step back and think critically. Breaking free from the bandwagon effect starts with awareness. Pay attention to situations where you feel pressured to conform or agree. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I believe in it or because everyone else is? Recognizing when you're being influenced by the crowd is the first step toward reclaiming your autonomy. Take time to evaluate your own values, beliefs, and priorities. What matters most to you? When you have a strong sense of your identity and principles, it becomes easier to resist external pressures. For example, if sustainability is important to you, you might think twice before jumping on the latest fast fashion trend, even if everyone else is raving about it. Another helpful strategy is to seek out diverse perspectives. The bandwagon effect often thrives in echo chambers where everyone around you shares similar views. By exposing yourself to different opinions, cultures, and ideas, you can broaden your understanding and make more informed decisions. For instance, if a particular political movement is gaining traction, take the time to research both its supporters and critics before forming your own opinion. It's also important to practice critical thinking. When you notice a popular trend or idea, ask yourself, what evidence supports this? What are the potential downsides? Does this align with my goals and values? By engaging with these questions, you can move beyond surface-level influence and make choices that feel authentic to you. Mindfulness can also help you resist the pull of the crowd. When you feel swept up in a group's energy, pause and ground yourself in the present moment. Take a few deep breaths and reflect on how you're feeling. Are you excited, anxious, or uncertain? Acknowledging your emotions can help you separate them from the external pressure to conform. Remember that it's okay to stand out. Going against the crowd can be intimidating, but it's often necessary to stay true to yourself. Trust that your perspective is valid, even if it's different from the majority. In fact, some of the most innovative ideas and meaningful changes in history have come from people who dared to challenge the status quo. The bandwagon effect is a natural part of human behavior, but it doesn't have to control you. By staying aware, asking questions, and honoring your individuality, you can make choices that reflect who you truly are, rather than who the crowd wants you to be. The next time you find yourself tempted to follow the crowd, pause and ask, am I on this bandwagon because I believe in it, or because it's simply rolling by? Chapter 13. The Sunk Cost Fallacy. Have you ever found yourself sticking with something, whether it's a project, relationship, job, or investment, not because it's making you happy or serving you, but because you've already put so much time, effort, or money into it? That's the sunk cost fallacy at work, a psychological trap where your mind convinces you to keep investing in something simply to avoid wasting what you've already spent, even when it's no longer a wise or beneficial choice. The term sunk cost refers to resources that are already gone, time, money, or effort that can't be recovered. Logically, these past investments shouldn't factor into decisions about the future. However, your brain doesn't always think logically. Instead, It clings to the idea that abandoning something means admitting defeat or failure, which can feel emotionally unbearable. As a result, you may keep pouring resources into a losing proposition, hoping to make it worth it, even when all signs point to letting go. The sunk cost fallacy shows up in many areas of life. In personal relationships, you might stay with a partner who no longer makes you happy because you've been together for years and can't bear to see that time as wasted. At work, you might stick with a job that's draining you because you've invested years climbing the corporate ladder. Even in small, everyday decisions, the sunk cost fallacy can rear its head, like forcing yourself to finish a terrible movie because you paid for the ticket, or continuing a meal you're not enjoying because you spent money on it. The problem with the sunk cost fallacy is that it often leads to more wasted resources. By focusing on what you've already lost, you ignore the opportunity to make better choices moving forward. Imagine spending years in a career you dislike simply because of the time and energy you've already invested, only to look back later and wish you had made a change sooner. The sunk cost fallacy keeps you trapped in a cycle of diminishing returns, where you're throwing good resources after bad. So, how do you break free from this mental trap? The first step is to recognize when it's happening. Pay attention to moments when you're justifying a decision based on past investments rather than future benefits. Ask yourself, am I sticking with this because it's truly the best option, or because I don't want to feel like I've wasted my time or money? Focus on the present and the future rather than the past. What matters most is not what you've already invested, but what you stand to gain or lose moving forward. If continuing with a choice no longer aligns with your goals, values, or well-being, it might be time to let it go, even if that means walking away from a significant investment. For example, if you've spent years in a relationship that's no longer fulfilling, consider whether staying will bring you the happiness and growth you desire, or if it's holding you back. Another helpful strategy is to reframe the idea of wasting resources. Instead of seeing letting go as a failure, view it as a learning experience. Every investment, whether it's time, money, or effort, teaches you something valuable, even if the outcome isn't what you hoped for. By shifting your perspective, you can let go of the guilt and focus on what you've gained from the experience. You can also practice decision-making based on objective criteria. Create a list of pros and cons, or outline your long-term goals. Does sticking with this choice move you closer to your desired future, or is it keeping you stuck? Having a clear framework can help you make decisions that are grounded in logic and intention, rather than emotions tied to the past. Practice self-compassion. The sunk cost fallacy often comes with feelings of regret, guilt, or fear of judgment. Remind yourself that everyone makes decisions based on the information they have at the time. Just because something didn't work out as planned doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. Forgive yourself for past investments that didn't pan out and focus on making the best decisions for your future. The sunk cost fallacy is a powerful mental trap, but it's not impossible to overcome. By shifting your focus from what's already gone to what lies ahead, you can free yourself from the burden of past investments and make choices that align with your happiness and goals. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "I've already put so much into this," pause and ask, what will serve me best moving forward? Letting go isn't about giving up. It's about creating space for something better. Chapter 14. Social Comparison Trap. Do you ever catch yourself looking at someone else's life and thinking, "Why can't I have that?" Or, "They're so much more successful, happier, or better than me"? This mental habit is known as the social comparison trap, and it's one of the most common ways your mind can trick you into feeling inadequate or unworthy. By comparing yourself to others, often without knowing the full context, you undermine your own confidence and happiness. Social comparison is a natural human tendency. We use it as a way to measure our progress, understand our place in the world, and learn from others. In small doses, it can even motivate us to improve ourselves. But in today's hyper-connected world, where social media showcases carefully curated versions of people's lives, social comparison often becomes unhealthy. You might see someone posting about their new job, vacation, or relationship, and immediately feel like your own achievements pale in comparison. The problem is, you're comparing your behind-the-scenes reality to someone else's highlight reel. The social comparison trap can show up in many areas of life. At work, you might compare your career trajectory to a colleague's and feel like you're falling behind. In relationships, you might envy a friend's seemingly perfect partnership while ignoring the challenges they don't share. Even in your appearance, you might measure yourself against influencers or celebrities, forgetting that their polished images often come with filters, makeup, and professional editing. The trap of social comparison is that it focuses your attention on what you lack rather than what you have. It shifts your perspective from gratitude to scarcity, leaving you feeling inadequate or resentful. This mindset not only harms your self-esteem, but also prevents you from celebrating your own unique journey. Worse, it can create a cycle of negativity, where no matter what you achieve, you constantly look to others and think, "It's not enough." So, how can you break free from the social comparison trap? The first step is to recognize when it's happening. Pay attention to moments when you feel envious, insecure, or overly critical of yourself. Ask yourself, am I comparing my life to someone else's? Is this comparison helpful or harmful? Often, simply being aware of the habit can help you detach from it. Shift your focus inward. Instead of comparing yourself to others, compare yourself to your past self. How far have you come? What challenges have you overcome? What skills have you developed? This type of comparison, measuring your growth over time, can inspire you and reinforce your progress without diminishing your self-worth. It's also important to practice gratitude. When you're caught up in what others have, take a moment to reflect on what you have. What are you proud of? What brings you joy? Gratitude shifts your mindset from lack to abundance, reminding you that your life is valuable and meaningful in its own way. Another strategy is to limit your exposure to triggers. If social media often makes you feel inadequate, consider curating your feed to include accounts that uplift and inspire you, rather than ones that spark envy. You might also take breaks from social media or set boundaries around how much time you spend online. Remember, it's okay to protect your mental health. Additionally, remind yourself that everyone's journey is different. Just because someone else is succeeding doesn't mean you're failing. Life isn't a race or a competition. It's a unique path that unfolds at its own pace. Celebrate others' successes without comparing them to your own, and trust that your journey has its own timing and purpose. Practice self-compassion. When you find yourself caught in the comparison trap, be kind to yourself. Acknowledge your feelings without judgment, and remind yourself that it's okay to have moments of doubt or insecurity. Treat yourself with the same understanding and encouragement you would offer a friend. The social comparison trap is easy to fall into, but it doesn't have to define you. By shifting your focus inward, practicing gratitude, and embracing your unique journey, you can break free from the cycle of comparison and build a life that feels fulfilling and authentic to you. The next time you find yourself thinking, "Why don't I have what they have?" pause and ask, "What do I already have, and how can I make the most of it?" You might be surprised by how much beauty and value your life already holds. Chapter 15. The Ostrich Effect. Have you ever avoided checking your bank account after an expensive weekend, skipped a doctor's appointment because you were afraid of bad news, or ignored a problem at work, hoping it would resolve itself? This behavior is an example of the ostrich effect, a psychological tendency to bury your head in the sand and avoid unpleasant information. While it might feel comforting in the moment, this mental habit often leads to bigger problems in the long run. The ostrich effect is driven by our natural desire to avoid discomfort. When we anticipate bad news or unpleasant truths, our minds convince us that it's better not to know. Ignorance can feel like a temporary shield against anxiety, guilt, or fear. However, avoiding a problem doesn't make it go away. It often makes it worse. For example, avoiding a financial issue might lead to mounting debt, or ignoring health symptoms might delay necessary treatment. This effect can show up in various aspects of life. In personal finances, people might avoid opening bills, checking their credit score, or facing budgeting challenges because the thought of dealing with money stresses them out. In relationships, someone might ignore growing tension or avoid difficult conversations to dodge conflict, only to see the issues escalate. Even at work, people might procrastinate on tasks they're uncertain about, leading to last-minute panic and lower quality results. The ostrich effect might feel protective, but it's a short-term solution that often causes long-term harm. By avoiding reality, you lose the chance to address issues proactively and make informed decisions. Instead, the problems you ignore tend to grow until they become unavoidable, leaving you feeling overwhelmed and unprepared. So, how do you overcome the ostrich effect and face challenges head-on? The first step is to acknowledge when you're avoiding something. Pay attention to moments when you find yourself procrastinating, ignoring, or rationalizing why you shouldn't deal with the situation. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of? Why am I avoiding this? Naming your fears can help reduce their power and bring clarity to the situation. Take small, manageable steps toward addressing the issue. Instead of overwhelming yourself by tackling everything at once, break it down into smaller tasks. For example, if you're avoiding finances, start by reviewing one account or listing your expenses for the week. If you're dreading a difficult conversation, begin by writing down what you want to say. Small actions build momentum and make larger tasks feel less intimidating. It's also helpful to reframe your mindset around discomfort. Remind yourself that facing an issue might be uncomfortable in the short term, but it's the only way to find solutions and move forward. For example, checking your bank balance might feel stressful initially, but it gives you the information you need to create a plan. Having a difficult conversation might feel awkward, but it can lead to greater understanding and stronger relationships. Another strategy is to seek support. You don't have to face challenges alone. Share your concerns with a trusted friend, mentor, or professional who can offer guidance and encouragement. Sometimes, simply talking about what you're avoiding can make it feel more manageable. Practice mindfulness to stay present with your emotions. When you notice the urge to avoid something, pause and tune into how you're feeling. Are you anxious, overwhelmed, or unsure? Acknowledge these emotions without judgment and remind yourself that it's okay to feel this way. By staying present, you can respond to the situation with clarity and intention, rather than reacting out of fear. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small. Each time you face a challenge instead of avoiding it, you build resilience and confidence. Over time, this practice can transform the way you approach difficulties, helping you become more proactive and empowered. The ostrich effect is a natural response to discomfort, but it doesn't have to control you. By confronting challenges directly, taking small steps, and seeking support, you can break free from avoidance and create positive change in your life. The next time you feel the urge to bury your head in the sand, pause and ask, what's one small step I can take to face this today? You might be surprised by how much lighter and more in control you feel when you choose to engage with reality instead of avoiding it. Chapter 16. The Availability Heuristic. Have you ever overestimated the likelihood of something happening simply because it's easy to recall? For instance, you might think plane crashes are common because you've seen dramatic news stories about them, or you might assume winning the lottery is likely because you've heard about someone who did. This mental shortcut is called the availability heuristic, and it's when your mind relies on the most readily available information, often recent or vivid examples, to make judgments, regardless of whether that information is representative or accurate. The availability heuristic is a survival mechanism that helps our brains process information quickly. Instead of analyzing all possible data, we rely on examples that are easy to recall to make decisions. While this can save time in day-to-day life, it often leads to skewed perceptions of reality. For example, after hearing about a shark attack in the news, you might become overly fearful of swimming in the ocean, even though the actual risk is extremely low. Similarly, you might believe crime is rising in your area if you frequently hear about it on social media, even if statistics show otherwise. This mental shortcut affects more than just your fears. It also influences your decisions. For instance, in personal finance, people might overestimate the risks of investing in the stock market because they remember hearing about dramatic losses while underestimating the long-term growth potential of diversified investments. In relationships, you might let one negative experience overshadow years of positive ones, leading to biased judgments about a person or situation. The availability heuristic can also fuel biases and stereotypes. If the media frequently portrays certain groups of people in specific roles or situations, those images become more accessible in your mind, shaping how you perceive reality. This can lead to unfair assumptions and limit your ability to see people as individuals. The danger of the availability heuristic is that it often makes decisions feel logical when they're not. Your brain tells you, I remember this happening, so it must be common, or this feels vivid, so it must be important. But vividness doesn't equal accuracy, and ease of recall doesn't mean something is likely or true. By relying on the availability heuristic, you might miss out on opportunities, make poor decisions, or harbor unnecessary fears. So, how can you overcome the availability heuristic and make more balanced judgments? The first step is to recognize when it's influencing your thinking. Pay attention to moments when you're making decisions or forming opinions based on vivid examples or recent experiences. Ask yourself, am I basing this on solid evidence or just on what comes to mind easily? Seek out broader information. When making important decisions, look for reliable data and diverse perspectives rather than relying solely on anecdotal evidence. For example, if you're evaluating a job opportunity, research industry trends and company reviews, instead of focusing on one story you heard about someone's experience. If you're concerned about a risk, like flying or investing, look at actual statistics to get a clearer picture of the likelihood and impact. It's also helpful to challenge your assumptions by asking critical questions. What is the real probability of this happening? Am I focusing on one vivid example instead of the bigger picture? What are other possible explanations or outcomes? By engaging in this type of critical thinking, you can move beyond gut reactions and make decisions that are more grounded in reality. Another way to counter the availability heuristic is to broaden your perspective. Exposure to diverse experiences, cultures, and viewpoints can help you challenge narrow or overly vivid narratives. For instance, traveling, reading widely, or engaging in conversations with people who have different backgrounds can expand your understanding of the world and reduce the influence of isolated examples. Practice mindfulness to stay present with your thoughts and emotions. When you feel a strong reaction to a vivid memory or example, pause and reflect. Acknowledge the feeling without letting it dictate your decisions. For example, if a recent car accident makes you anxious about driving, remind yourself that the emotional intensity of the memory doesn't necessarily reflect the actual risk. The availability heuristic is a natural mental shortcut, but it doesn't have to control your thinking. By questioning vivid examples, seeking reliable data, and broadening your perspective, you can make clearer, more informed decisions. The next time your mind says, "This is so memorable, it must be true," pause and ask, "What's the bigger picture?" In doing so, you'll free yourself from the grip of mental shortcuts and gain a deeper, more accurate understanding of the world. Chapter 17. The Framing Effect. Have you ever made a decision based on how information was presented to you rather than the actual content of that information? For example, you might choose a product labeled 90% fat-free over one labeled contains 10% fat, even though they're identical. This mental bias is called the framing effect, and it refers to how the way information is framed can significantly influence your choices and perceptions, even when the facts remain the same. The framing effect is rooted in how our brains process information. When something is framed in a positive light, such as gains or success, we're more likely to view it favorably. Conversely, when the same information is framed negatively, such as losses or failure, we're more likely to avoid it. For instance, people are more likely to opt for a medical treatment that has a 95% survival rate than one that carries a 5% chance of death, even though both statistics communicate the same risk. This mental bias can have far-reaching implications in various aspects of life. In marketing, companies often use framing to influence consumer behavior. A sale that says, "Save $20," is more appealing than one that says, "Pay $80," even if the original price was $100. In politics, policies are often framed to appeal to emotions. A tax cut might be presented as returning money to hard-working families, while opponents frame it as reducing funding for essential services. These frames shape public opinion by focusing attention on specific aspects of the issue. The framing effect also affects personal decisions. In relationships, the way a situation is presented can influence how you interpret it. For example, if someone says, "We've been through so many challenges and made it," you might feel proud and committed, while framing it as, "We've had so many struggles," might leave you feeling frustrated or doubtful. Similarly, in your career, a job opportunity framed as a chance to grow through challenges might seem exciting, while one framed as a lot of hard work might feel daunting. The danger of the framing effect is that it often leads to irrational decisions. By focusing on how information is presented rather than its actual substance, you might choose options that aren't truly in your best interest. It can also make you more susceptible to manipulation, as people who understand this bias can use it to influence your behavior. So, how can you overcome the framing effect and make more objective decisions? The first step is to recognize when information is being framed. Pay attention to the language and tone used to present choices. Ask yourself, is this framing influencing how I feel about the decision? What's the actual information behind the words? Reframe the information yourself. Look at the same data from multiple perspectives. For example, if a diet plan boasts a 90% success rate, consider the 10% failure rate as well. By actively reframing the information, you can see the full picture and make a more balanced judgment. Another strategy is to focus on your values and goals. When faced with a framed decision, ask, does this align with what's important to me? For example, if a financial advisor presents an investment as highly rewarding, think about whether it matches your risk tolerance and long-term goals, instead of getting caught up in the positive framing. It's also helpful to slow down your decision-making process. The framing effect often works because it triggers emotional responses that lead to snap decisions. By pausing, reflecting, and considering the facts, you can reduce the influence of emotional framing and make more rational choices. Seek out unbiased information. When you suspect framing is at play, look for neutral sources that present the data without spin. For example, if you're deciding between two products, compare their technical specifications directly rather than relying on marketing slogans. The framing effect is a subtle but powerful bias that can shape how you perceive the world and make decisions. By recognizing its influence, questioning the way information is presented, and focusing on the actual data, you can take control of your choices and make decisions that truly reflect your needs and values. The next time you hear a message that feels persuasive, pause and ask, what's the reality behind the frame? In doing so, you'll sharpen your critical thinking and empower yourself to see beyond the surface. Chapter 18. The Dunning-Kruger Effect. Have you ever been in a situation where someone who knew very little about a topic acted like they were an expert? Or, on the flip side, have you ever doubted your own abilities despite being highly skilled or knowledgeable? These scenarios illustrate the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias where people with limited knowledge or skill in a particular area overestimate their competence, while those who are more skilled tend to underestimate their abilities. The Dunning-Kruger effect occurs because people who are less experienced or knowledgeable lack the insight needed to recognize their own limitations. For example, someone who has just learned the basics of cooking might believe they're ready to compete on a cooking show because they don't yet understand the depth of skill and expertise required. Conversely, highly skilled individuals often recognize the complexity of a field, making them more aware of what they don't know. This self-awareness can lead them to undervalue their abilities or assume that others know just as much as they do. This cognitive bias can show up in many areas of life. In the workplace, you might encounter colleagues who confidently propose solutions to complex problems without fully understanding the issues, while experienced professionals hold back, thinking they need more data or preparation. In social settings, someone might dominate a conversation about politics or science, believing their limited understanding is sufficient, while experts stay quiet, unwilling to simplify a nuanced topic. The Dunning-Kruger effect can have real-world consequences. Overconfident individuals may take on tasks they're not prepared for, leading to poor outcomes, while underconfident experts may miss opportunities to share valuable insights or advance their careers. On a societal level, this bias can contribute to the spread of misinformation, as people with limited understanding confidently present their opinions as facts, influencing others who don't know enough to question them. So, how can you counter the Dunning-Kruger effect in yourself and others? The first step is to cultivate self-awareness. Ask yourself, how much do I really know about this topic? Could there be more to it than I realize? Being honest about your knowledge and experience is key to avoiding overconfidence. Similarly, if you're doubting your abilities, remind yourself that self-doubt often accompanies expertise. Consider seeking feedback from trusted colleagues, friends, or mentors who can provide an objective view of your skills. Commit to continuous learning. The more you explore a subject, the more you'll understand its complexities and your own limitations. For example, if you're passionate about public speaking, attending workshops, or learning from professionals, can help you gain a deeper understanding of what it takes to excel. Over time, this knowledge will help you balance confidence with humility. It's also important to stay open to feedback and alternative perspectives. If someone challenges your viewpoint or highlights a mistake, resist the urge to dismiss them or become defensive. Instead, view it as an opportunity to grow. Recognizing and addressing gaps in your knowledge not only helps you improve, but also earns you respect from others. When dealing with others who exhibit the Dunning-Kruger effect, approach them with patience and curiosity. Rather than shutting them down, ask questions that encourage deeper thinking, such as, "What led you to that conclusion?" or "Have you considered other perspectives?" This approach can help them recognize the limits of their understanding without feeling attacked or dismissed. Practice humility. No matter how much you know, there will always be more to learn. Embrace a mindset of curiosity and growth, and remind yourself that it's okay not to have all the answers. Acknowledging what you don't know is not a weakness, it's a strength that opens the door to learning and collaboration. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a natural cognitive bias, but it doesn't have to control your thinking. By staying self-aware, seeking knowledge, and embracing humility, you can navigate this bias and make more informed decisions. The next time you feel overly confident about a topic or find yourself doubting your expertise, pause and ask, "What don't I know yet?" This simple question can keep you grounded, curious, and open to lifelong growth. Chapter 19. The Optimism Bias. Have you ever believed that good things are more likely to happen to you than to others, or that you're less likely to face challenges or risks? Maybe you think you'll live a longer, healthier life than average, or that your big project will succeed without a hitch. This mental habit is known as the optimism bias, and while it can motivate you to pursue goals and stay hopeful, it can also lead to overconfidence and poor preparation for potential setbacks. The optimism bias is a cognitive tendency to overestimate positive outcomes and underestimate negative ones, particularly for yourself. For example, you might think, "I'll never get into a car accident even if I drive recklessly," or "I don't need to save for emergencies because nothing major will go wrong." This bias can give you a sense of invincibility or blind confidence that shields you from anxiety, but also makes you less likely to prepare for risks or challenges. Optimism bias is deeply rooted in human psychology. It helps protect us from the overwhelming nature of uncertainty and fear by allowing us to focus on potential rewards instead of risks. In moderation, this bias can be a good thing. It can motivate you to take risks, try new things, and push forward even when the odds aren't entirely in your favor. For example, entrepreneurs often rely on optimism to start businesses despite the high rate of failure. Without this bias, people might never take the risks needed for growth and progress. However, unchecked optimism bias can also lead to unrealistic expectations, poor planning, and avoidable failures. For instance, if you assume a project will go smoothly, you might neglect contingency plans, only to face delays or obstacles that derail your progress. In relationships, optimism bias might make you overlook red flags, believing that everything will work out on its own. In finances, it might lead to undersaving or overspending, assuming you'll always have time to catch up later. So how can you manage the optimism bias and maintain a balanced perspective? The key is to balance hope and realism. Start by recognizing when optimism might be clouding your judgment. Ask yourself, am I assuming the best-case scenario? Have I considered potential challenges or risks? Acknowledging the possibility of setbacks doesn't mean giving up on optimism. It means preparing for a range of outcomes. Adopt a mindset of strategic optimism. This involves maintaining a positive outlook while also planning for potential obstacles. For example, if you're starting a new project, visualize its success, but also create backup plans in case things don't go as expected. If you're pursuing a big goal, like running a marathon, be optimistic about crossing the finish line, but realistic about the time and effort needed to train properly. It's also important to seek out diverse perspectives. Optimism bias can make you blind to blind spots, but feedback from others can help you see the bigger picture. Talk to people who've faced similar situations and ask about the challenges they encountered. Their insights can help you prepare for potential pitfalls while keeping your goals in sight. Practicing mindfulness can also help you stay grounded. When you notice yourself getting caught up in overly optimistic thoughts, pause and reflect on the present moment. Are your expectations realistic, or are you ignoring important details? Mindfulness helps you approach situations with clarity and balance, allowing you to embrace both optimism and caution. Finally, cultivate resilience. Optimism bias often assumes that avoiding setbacks is the goal, but challenges are an inevitable part of life. Instead of fearing or ignoring them, focus on building the skills and mindset needed to navigate them. Resilience allows you to stay hopeful while also being prepared for the ups and downs of life. The optimism bias is a natural part of being human, and it can be a powerful force for motivation and hope. However, by balancing it with realism and preparation, you can harness its benefits without falling into its traps. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "Nothing will go wrong," pause and ask, "What steps can I take to ensure success, even if challenges arise?" By combining optimism with foresight, you can create a future that's both hopeful and well-prepared. Chapter 20. The Illusion of Transparency. Have you ever assumed that your emotions, thoughts, or intentions were obvious to others, only to find out they had no idea what you were feeling or thinking? Maybe you felt nervous during a presentation and believed everyone in the audience could see your anxiety, or you thought a close friend understood why you were upset, only to realize they were completely unaware. This mental habit is known as the illusion of transparency, a cognitive bias where we overestimate how much others can perceive our internal states. The illusion of transparency stems from the fact that we're highly aware of our own emotions and thoughts. When you're feeling nervous, frustrated, or excited, those feelings seem so vivid to you that it's hard to imagine others don't notice them too. However, most people are far less attuned to your internal experience than you think. They're often preoccupied with their own thoughts and emotions, making them unlikely to pick up on subtle cues unless you explicitly share what's going on. This bias can affect many areas of life. In public speaking, people often believe their nervousness is glaringly obvious, when in reality, the audience is usually unaware of small signs like a shaky voice or sweaty palms. In relationships, you might assume your partner knows why you're upset, leading to frustration when they don't respond as expected. At work, you might think your enthusiasm or dissatisfaction is clear, only to realize your colleagues or boss had no idea. The illusion of transparency can lead to unnecessary anxiety, miscommunication, and unmet expectations. If you believe others can read your mind, you might avoid expressing yourself clearly, assuming they already understand. When they don't respond as you hoped, it can create feelings of frustration, disappointment, or isolation. Similarly, if you assume others are as focused on your flaws or mistakes as you are, it can amplify your self-consciousness and erode your confidence. So, how can you overcome the illusion of transparency and improve your interactions with others? The first step is to recognize that your internal experience is far more visible to you than it is to others. Remind yourself, just because I feel this strongly doesn't mean others can see it. This simple shift in perspective can reduce anxiety and help you approach situations with greater clarity. Communicate openly. Instead of expecting others to pick up on your feelings or intentions, express them directly. For example, if you're nervous about a presentation, you might say, "I'm feeling a little nervous, but I'm excited to share this with you." If you're upset with a friend or partner, explain why. "I was hurt when you cancelled our plans, because I was really looking forward to spending time together." Clear communication helps others understand your perspective and respond more effectively. It's also helpful to practice self-compassion. The illusion of transparency often makes us hyper-aware of our perceived flaws or mistakes, assuming everyone else is just as focused on them. Remind yourself that most people are too busy with their own concerns to notice every little thing about you. Even if they do notice something, it's rarely as significant to them as it feels to you. In public speaking or other high-pressure situations, focus on your message rather than your emotions. Instead of thinking, "Everyone can see how nervous I am," shift your attention to what you want to communicate. Remember, your audience is there to hear your ideas, not to scrutinize your emotional state. Another way to counter the illusion of transparency is to ask for feedback. If you're unsure whether your emotions or intentions are coming across, check in with others. For example, after a meeting, you might ask a colleague, "Did my enthusiasm come through, or should I have been more explicit?" This not only helps you clarify your message, but also builds stronger connections with others. Embrace the idea that miscommunication is a normal part of human interaction. No one can read minds, and misunderstandings are inevitable. What matters most is your willingness to clarify, adjust, and keep the lines of communication open. The illusion of transparency is a natural bias, but it doesn't have to hold you back. By recognizing its influence, communicating openly, and focusing on what truly matters, you can build stronger relationships, reduce anxiety, and express yourself with greater confidence. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "Everyone knows how I feel," pause and ask, "Have I actually communicated this clearly?" You might find that a little extra effort in expressing yourself goes a long way in bridging the gap between your inner world and the perceptions of others. Chapter 21. The Zeigarnik Effect. Have you ever found it hard to stop thinking about something you left unfinished? Maybe it was a project at work, a conversation that ended abruptly, or even a book you started but never finished. This mental phenomenon is known as the Zeigarnik Effect, where your brain fixates on incomplete tasks, making them feel more prominent and harder to forget compared to completed ones. The Zeigarnik Effect occurs because unfinished tasks create a sense of mental tension. Your brain views them as incomplete stories that need resolution, so they linger in your mind until you address them. This effect can be both helpful and frustrating. On one hand, it can motivate you to complete tasks, as the mental discomfort pushes you toward resolution. On the other hand, it can lead to stress, distraction, and even insomnia if the unfinished tasks pile up and weigh on your mind. In daily life, the Zeigarnik effect shows up in various ways. For instance, if you leave work in the middle of an important email, you might find yourself thinking about it all evening. Or if you start studying for an exam and take a break before finishing a section, your brain might keep nudging you to return to it, even when you're trying to relax. This effect can also explain why cliffhangers in TV shows or books are so effective. They leave you with a sense of incompletion that compels you to find out what happens next. While the Zeigarnik effect can drive productivity, it can also create mental clutter if not managed properly. When too many unfinished tasks occupy your mind, it becomes harder to focus, leading to feelings of overwhelm and reduced efficiency. For example, if you juggle multiple projects without clear priorities, your brain might keep bouncing between them, making it difficult to concentrate on any one thing. So how can you manage the Zeigarnik effect and use it to your advantage? The first step is to create a clear system for tracking tasks. Writing down what needs to be done can help offload the mental tension caused by unfinished work. A to-do list, project management app, or even a simple notebook can serve as a reliable external memory, freeing your mind from the burden of constantly reminding you. Try breaking tasks into smaller, manageable steps. The Zeigarnik effect thrives on a sense of incompletion, so completing even a small part of a task can provide a sense of progress and reduce mental tension. For instance, if you're working on a lengthy report, focus on finishing one section at a time instead of tackling the entire project at once. Another helpful strategy is to set clear boundaries for your work. If you need to step away from an unfinished task, leave yourself a note or plan for where to pick up when you return. This simple step reassures your brain that the task is under control, reducing the urge to obsess over it. Practicing mindfulness can also help you manage the Zeigarnik effect. When your mind keeps returning to unfinished tasks, take a moment to acknowledge the thought without judgment. Remind yourself that it's okay to have things in progress, and that not everything needs immediate resolution. This perspective can help you stay calm and focused, even when tasks are left incomplete. Celebrate completions, no matter how small. The Zeigarnik effect can sometimes make you hyper-focused on what's left to do, overshadowing what you've already accomplished. Take time to recognize your progress and reflect on the tasks you've completed. It can help balance your perspective and motivate you to tackle what's next. The Zeigarnik effect is a natural part of how your brain processes tasks, but it doesn't have to overwhelm you. By creating systems, breaking tasks into smaller steps, and practicing mindfulness, you can harness this mental tendency to stay productive and focused without feeling burdened by incompletion. The next time your mind fixates on something unfinished, pause and ask, "What's one small step I can take to move this forward?" Often that simple action is enough to bring clarity and peace. Chapter 22. The Negativity Bias. Have you ever noticed how one negative comment or experience can stick with you, even when surrounded by positive ones? For instance, you might receive 10 compliments on a project, but all you can think about is the one critical remark. This mental tendency is known as the negativity bias, and it's your brain's natural inclination to focus more on negative events, emotions, or information than positive ones. The negativity bias is deeply rooted in human evolution. For our ancestors, being alert to danger was critical for survival. Recognizing threats like predators or poisonous plants ensured they stayed alive, so our brains became wired to give more weight to negative stimuli than positive ones. While this heightened sensitivity was beneficial in the past, it can lead to stress and unhappiness in modern life, where most perceived threats aren't life-threatening. This bias shows up in many aspects of daily life. In relationships, you might dwell on a partner's one critical comment while overlooking their many acts of kindness. At work, you might obsess over a single mistake, even though you've accomplished countless successes. On social media, you might fixate on one negative comment amid a sea of positive feedback. This constant focus on the negative can skew your perception of reality, making the world and yourself seem worse than they actually are. The The negativity bias doesn't just affect your thoughts, it also influences your behavior. It can make you avoid risks, hesitate to try new things, or overreact to small setbacks. For example, if you had a bad experience giving a presentation, you might avoid speaking in public again, even though most of your audience enjoyed your talk. This bias can limit your opportunities and keep you stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and fear. So, how can you counter the negativity bias and create a more balanced perspective? The first step is awareness. Notice when your mind lingers on negative events or thoughts, and remind yourself that this focus is a natural tendency, not a reflection of reality. For instance, if you find yourself replaying a critical comment in your head, pause and ask, "Am I ignoring the positive feedback I received?" Practice gratitude. Make it a habit to reflect on the good things in your life, no matter how small. You might keep a gratitude journal, jotting down 3 things you're thankful for each day. By training your brain to focus on the positive, you can gradually shift your perspective and reduce the impact of negativity bias. Another powerful strategy is to reframe negative experiences. Instead of seeing a mistake as a failure, view it as a learning opportunity. For example, if you received critical feedback at work, consider how it might help you grow and improve, rather than dwelling on the discomfort it caused. Reframing allows you to extract value from challenging situations without letting them overwhelm you. Mindfulness can also help you manage negativity bias. When negative thoughts arise, acknowledge them without judgment, and then let them go. For instance, if you're stuck thinking about a past argument, take a moment to observe the thought, label it as just a thought, and return your focus to the present moment. Mindfulness helps you detach from negative spirals and regain control of your mental state. Surround yourself with positivity. Seek out uplifting environments, supportive relationships, and activities that bring you joy. The more you immerse yourself in positive experiences, the easier it becomes to balance out the negativity your brain naturally fixates on. The negativity bias is a deeply ingrained part of human psychology, but it doesn't have to define your perspective. By cultivating awareness, practicing gratitude, reframing challenges, and embracing mindfulness, you can train your brain to see the bigger picture, one that includes both the good and the bad. The next time you find yourself fixating on something negative, pause and ask, "What's one positive thing I can focus on right now?" You might be surprised by how much brighter your world becomes. Chapter 23. The Overconfidence Effect. Have you ever been so sure of your opinion, decision, or prediction that you dismissed opposing viewpoints or didn't consider all the facts, only to find out later you were wrong? This mental habit is called the overconfidence effect, and it's the tendency to overestimate your abilities, knowledge, or the accuracy of your judgments. While confidence can be empowering, overconfidence often blinds you to potential risks, leading to mistakes, miscalculations, or missed opportunities. The overconfidence effect is a natural byproduct of how our brains process information. When you succeed at something, your brain releases dopamine, reinforcing your belief in your abilities. This positive feedback loop is essential for building self-esteem and taking risks, but it can also create a distorted sense of certainty. For instance, after making a few correct stock market predictions, you might start believing you're a financial expert, ignoring the role of luck or market volatility. Overconfidence can manifest in many areas of life. In decision-making, it might lead you to underestimate the complexity of a problem or overestimate your ability to solve it. In academics or work, you might overrate your expertise, assuming you know more than you do, which can prevent you from seeking help or learning new skills. In relationships, overconfidence might make you dismiss your partner's perspective, believing your view is always the right one. While confidence is often celebrated as a positive trait, overconfidence can have serious consequences. It can lead to taking unnecessary risks, overlooking important details, or under-preparing for challenges. For example, an entrepreneur might launch a business without conducting proper market research, assuming their idea will succeed based on gut feeling alone. Similarly, in health, someone might ignore medical advice, believing they know their body better than a trained professional. So, how can you manage the overconfidence effect and strike a balance between healthy confidence and humility? The first step is self-awareness. Pay attention to situations where you feel overly certain or dismissive of alternative viewpoints. Ask yourself, what evidence supports my belief? Could I be overlooking something important? Recognizing your biases is the foundation for more balanced thinking. Embrace the idea of uncertainty. Instead of seeing doubt as a weakness, view it as an opportunity to learn and grow. For example, if you're confident about a decision, take the time to explore opposing perspectives or consider worst-case scenarios. By actively seeking out alternative viewpoints, you can identify blind spots and make more informed choices. Practicing humility is another powerful tool for countering overconfidence. Remind yourself that no one knows everything and that mistakes are a natural part of learning. Instead of focusing solely on what you already know, cultivate curiosity about what you don't know. For instance, if you're discussing a topic you're passionate about, listen to others' insights and be open to changing your mind. Another strategy is to rely on data and facts. When making decisions, look for objective information rather than relying solely on intuition or past successes. For example, if you're planning a project, gather input from colleagues or industry experts to ensure your plan is realistic and comprehensive. Feedback is also essential for keeping overconfidence in check. Seek out honest input from people you trust and be willing to accept constructive criticism. For example, if you're preparing for a big presentation, ask for feedback on your draft and use it to refine your approach. Feedback helps you identify areas for improvement and ensures you're not overestimating your abilities. Practice mindfulness to stay grounded in the present moment. Overconfidence often stems from a focus on past successes or future expectations. By staying present and focusing on the task at hand, you can approach challenges with clarity and intention rather than letting your ego take over. The overconfidence effect is a common mental bias, but it doesn't have to hold you back. By cultivating self-awareness, embracing uncertainty, and seeking feedback, you can develop a balanced sense of confidence that empowers you to take risks while staying realistic. The next time you feel overly certain about something, pause and ask, "What don't I know yet?" This simple question can help you approach situations with humility, curiosity, and a clearer perspective. Chapter 24. The Endowment Effect. Have you ever noticed how you tend to value something you own more highly than the same item if it belonged to someone else? For example, you might believe your old car is worth far more than what a buyer is willing to pay, or feel reluctant to throw away an unused gift simply because it's yours. This mental bias is called the endowment effect, and it reflects our tendency to overvalue things just because we own them. The endowment effect is rooted in our psychological connection to possessions. Ownership creates a sense of attachment and identity, making it difficult to separate the object from its emotional value. When something becomes mine, it takes on greater significance, even if its actual utility or market value hasn't changed. This bias can be beneficial in fostering appreciation and care for what we own, but it can also lead to irrational decisions and missed opportunities. This effect shows up in many areas of life. In personal finances, People often refuse to sell investments that have lost value, holding on in the hope of a rebound, even when it might be wiser to cut their losses. In relationships, someone might hold on to sentimental items that no longer serve a purpose, simply because they're tied to a memory. In business, entrepreneurs might overestimate the value of their product or company, making it harder to negotiate deals or adapt to market feedback. The problem with the endowment effect is that it can cloud your judgment and prevent you from making rational decisions. By overvaluing what you already own, you might miss out on better opportunities or waste resources maintaining something that no longer benefits you. For example, keeping unused items in your home because they feel valuable can lead to clutter and stress, while refusing to let go of a failing project can drain time, money, and energy. So how can you overcome the endowment effect and make more objective decisions? The first step is to recognize when it's influencing your thinking. Pay attention to situations where you feel reluctant to part with something and ask yourself, am I valuing this objectively or just because it's mine? Try to view the item or decision from an outsider's perspective. Ask yourself, if I didn't already own this, how much would I be willing to pay for it? This mental shift can help you detach emotionally and evaluate the true worth of the object or investment. For example, if you're trying to sell a car, research its market value and consider how you would perceive it as a potential buyer. Another helpful strategy is to focus on opportunity cost. Consider what you're giving up by holding on to something. For instance, if you're clinging to a failing investment, think about how that money could be used more effectively elsewhere. If you're keeping sentimental items that take up space, think about how freeing up that space could improve your living environment. Decluttering practices, like the KonMari method, can also help you manage the endowment effect. By asking whether an item sparks joy or serves a meaningful purpose, you can identify what truly matters to you and let go of the rest. This approach encourages intentional ownership, helping you focus on quality over quantity. Practicing mindfulness can also reduce the grip of the endowment effect. When you feel attached to something, pause and reflect on your emotions. Are you holding on to it because it truly adds value to your life, or because of an emotional attachment to ownership? Acknowledging these feelings without judgment can help you make more intentional decisions. Embrace change. Remind yourself that letting go of one thing creates room for something better. Whether it's selling an underused item, cutting ties with an unproductive project, or saying goodbye to outdated ideas, releasing what no longer serves you can open the door to new opportunities and growth. The endowment effect is a natural part of human psychology, but it doesn't have to limit you. By questioning your attachments, considering opportunity costs, and embracing change, you can make clearer, more rational decisions. The next time you feel reluctant to let go of something, pause and ask, if this wasn't mine, how would I see it? This simple shift in perspective can help you move forward with clarity and confidence. Chapter 25. The Fundamental Attribution Error. Have you ever judged someone harshly for their behavior without considering the circumstances that might have influenced them? For instance, if someone cuts you off in traffic, you might immediately think, "What a reckless driver," without considering they might be rushing to an emergency. Or, if a coworker misses a deadline, you might assume they're lazy, ignoring the possibility that they're dealing with personal challenges. This mental shortcut is known as the fundamental attribution error, and it's our tendency to attribute others' actions to their character while ignoring situational factors. The fundamental attribution error occurs because our brains like simple explanations. When we observe someone's behavior, it's easier to attribute it to who they are. She's careless, or he's selfish, rather than to what might be happening around them. She's overwhelmed with work, or he's under a lot of stress. This bias helps us make quick judgments, but it often leads to unfair assumptions and misinterpretations of others' actions. Interestingly, this bias is selective. When we make mistakes, we tend to blame external factors. I was late because traffic was bad, rather than our character. I'm irresponsible. This double standard allows us to protect our self-esteem while holding others to higher standards. For example, you might forgive yourself for snapping at a friend because you're tired, but judge someone else for being rude, assuming it reflects their personality. The fundamental attribution error can strain relationships and foster misunderstandings. In personal relationships, it might lead you to label a partner as inconsiderate for forgetting an anniversary, rather than acknowledging they've been preoccupied with work. At work, it might cause you to view a colleague as unmotivated for missing a meeting, without considering they might not have received the updated schedule. This bias can also perpetuate stereotypes and prejudices, as it encourages oversimplified judgments about groups of people based on limited interactions. So how can you overcome the fundamental attribution error and develop a more compassionate, balanced perspective? The first step is awareness. Notice when you're making snap judgments about someone's behavior and ask yourself, am I considering their circumstances, or am I jumping to conclusions about their character? Practice empathy by putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Imagine what might be going on in their life that could explain their actions. For example, if a coworker seems irritable, consider whether they might be dealing with stress, personal issues, or lack of sleep. This shift in perspective can help you respond with understanding rather than criticism. Another helpful strategy is to give others the benefit of the doubt. Assume that people's intentions are good unless you have clear evidence to the contrary. For instance, if a friend cancels plans at the last minute, instead of thinking, they don't care about me, try thinking, maybe they're overwhelmed or need time to themselves. You can also practice the principle of charity in communication. When discussing someone's behavior, focus on the situation rather than labeling their character. For example, instead of saying, "You're so irresponsible for being late," try saying, "It seems like traffic was tough today. Everything okay?" This approach fosters constructive conversations and strengthens relationships. Reflect on your own experiences. Think about times when others misjudged you or assumed the worst without knowing your circumstances. How did that make you feel? By remembering how it feels to be on the receiving end of the fundamental attribution error, you can cultivate greater empathy and understanding in your interactions with others. The fundamental attribution error is a natural mental bias, but it doesn't have to dictate your perceptions. By pausing to consider situational factors, practicing empathy, and communicating with kindness, you can build stronger, more meaningful connections. The next time you're tempted to judge someone's behavior harshly, pause and ask, what else might be going on here? Often, this simple act of curiosity can open the door to greater compassion and deeper understanding. Chapter 26. The Self-Fulfilling Prophecy. Have you ever noticed how your beliefs about yourself or others can subtly shape reality? For instance, if you walk into a meeting convinced you're going to fail, your nervousness might lead to mistakes, reinforcing your belief. Or if you assume someone is unfriendly, you might act distant toward them, prompting them to mirror your behavior and confirm your assumption. This psychological phenomenon is known as the self-fulfilling prophecy, where your expectations influence your actions, ultimately creating the outcome you anticipated. The self-fulfilling prophecy works because your thoughts and beliefs influence your behavior, often without you realizing it. When you expect a particular outcome, your subconscious mind aligns your actions, tone, and decisions to make that outcome more likely. For example, if you believe you're not good at public speaking, you might prepare less thoroughly, avoid practicing, and approach the situation with a defeated mindset. These behaviors increase the likelihood of a poor performance, validating your original belief. This effect isn't limited to your own behavior. It also impacts how you interact with others. If you expect someone to be rude, you might greet them coldly or defensively, which could lead them to respond in kind. Similarly, in relationships, if you constantly assume your partner will let you down, your skepticism might create tension that damages trust and communication, making disappointment more likely. These cycles can trap you in patterns of negativity, even when reality could be different. The self-fulfilling prophecy can show up in various areas of life, including work, education, and social interactions. In the workplace, if a manager expects an employee to underperform, they might provide less support or fewer opportunities, inadvertently setting the employee up for failure. In education, a teacher's low expectations for a student can lead to less encouragement, fewer challenges, and diminished self-confidence for the student, perpetuating the cycle of underachievement. However, the self-fulfilling prophecy isn't always negative. It can also work in your favor. Positive expectations can boost confidence, motivation, and effort, increasing the likelihood of success. For instance, if you believe you're capable of learning a new skill, you're more likely to put in the time and energy to master it. If you expect kindness from others, your friendly demeanor can encourage them to reciprocate, fostering positive relationships. The key lies in recognizing how your beliefs influence your actions and intentionally shaping those beliefs to create the outcomes you want. So, how can you harness the power of the self-fulfilling prophecy to break negative cycles and create positive ones? The first step is self-awareness. Pay attention to the beliefs and expectations you hold about yourself, others, and situations. Ask yourself, are my expectations helping or hindering me? Are they based on evidence, or are they assumptions? Challenge limiting beliefs. If you notice yourself thinking, "I'm not good at this," or "this will never work," question those thoughts. What evidence supports them? What evidence contradicts them? Often you'll find that these beliefs are based on fear or past experiences rather than objective reality. Replace them with empowering alternatives like, "I can learn and improve," or "This is an opportunity to try something new." Visualization can also help you shift your expectations. Spend time imagining positive outcomes and the steps you'll take to achieve them. For example, if you're preparing for a big presentation, picture yourself speaking confidently and engaging your audience. This mental rehearsal not only boosts confidence, but also helps align your actions with your desired outcome. Another strategy is to focus on behaviors you can control. Instead of obsessing over whether others will meet your expectations, concentrate on how you can create a supportive, constructive environment. For instance, if you want a team project to succeed, set clear goals, communicate openly, and offer encouragement. Your positive actions can influence the group dynamic and increase the chances of success. It's also important to practice empathy and give others the benefit of the doubt. If you catch yourself expecting the worst from someone, pause and consider, what might they be going through? How can I create an opportunity for a positive interaction? Shifting your perspective can help break cycles of negativity and build trust. Celebrate small wins and progress. Positive, self-fulfilling prophecies often start with small, intentional changes. Each time you challenge a limiting belief or act in alignment with a positive expectation, acknowledge your effort and the results. Over time, these small victories can build momentum, reinforcing your confidence and optimism. The self-fulfilling prophecy is a powerful psychological force, but it doesn't have to work against you. By becoming aware of your beliefs, challenging negative expectations, and intentionally fostering positive ones, you can shape your reality in ways that align with your goals and values. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "This is just the way things are," pause and ask, "What can I do to create the outcome I want?" Often, the power to change lies in shifting your perspective and taking intentional action. Our minds are incredible tools, capable of creativity, innovation, and problem-solving. But as we've explored in this book, they also come with built-in biases, shortcuts, and habits that can distort reality and lead us astray. From the illusion of control to the self-fulfilling prophecy, understanding how your mind works is the first step toward reclaiming your power and living a more intentional life. The journey through these 26 chapters reveals a central truth. Your thoughts are not always your reality. Your mind might magnify problems, cling to the past, or judge others unfairly, but these patterns aren't fixed. They're malleable. By recognizing the mental traps that influence your behavior, you can break free from automatic thinking and choose responses that align with your goals, values, and aspirations. Here's the good news. Awareness is transformative. Each time you pause to question your assumptions, challenge a bias, or reframe a negative thought, you take a step closer to mastering your mind. It's not about eliminating these mental tendencies, they're part of being human, but about learning to navigate them with curiosity and self-compassion. Throughout this journey, you've learned practical strategies to counteract these biases and take control of your mental habits. Whether it's questioning the anchors that influence your decisions, letting go of the need for control, or embracing the lessons of failure. Each tool equips you to face life's challenges with clarity and resilience. These aren't just techniques for solving problems, they're pathways to personal growth and empowerment. Remember, growth doesn't happen overnight. Changing how you think is a lifelong process, filled with moments of progress, setbacks, and reflection. Be patient with yourself, celebrate small victories, and stay committed to learning. The mind is a dynamic, ever-evolving force, and with practice, you can guide it toward greater balance, understanding, and purpose. Finally, let this book serve as a reminder that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer, the chooser, the creator of your own story. By becoming aware of how your mind tricks you, you unlock the freedom to shape your reality, not based on fear, bias, or assumptions, but on conscious choices that reflect your highest potential. As you move forward, remember this: your mind can be your greatest ally, but only if you learn to master it. Take these lessons with you, apply them in your daily life, and watch as your inner world transforms your outer one. The power is in your hands, and your mind is ready for the journey.